I don't have what I need. Yes, I do. Oh my god, she's organ. No, I definitely don't. Okay, now I have what I need. Welcome back. I was literally about to say it's been a hot minute since I've sat here and talked about books, but that's what we do every week. So, hello. How are you? I have read some books and I haven't told you about them. It's been a while since I've done a wrap up. I genuinely think the last one was in November. So here we are for December and January. As usual, I'm going to preface, we've got some reading vlogs for a lot of these books. I've got some that I can't even tell you about because that's not out yet. And we have some little ones in between that were not a part of any of those things that I will talk about today. But just know that any of the reading vlogs, there will be more in-depth and in-the-moment thoughts about those. I will leave them linked. But otherwise, let's jump in. Welcome. Hope you enjoy your stay. Let's talk about some books. The Kite Runner is my coaster for today. First up, in December, I finished Cursed by Marissa Meyer. I have already spoken at length about this book in the series, so I won't go too deeply into it today, but this is the final book in the Cursed duology by Marissa Meyer. She is the queen of retellings, and this one is about Rumpelstiltskin, which is one that I haven't really heard of before. There was so much that happened in this book, and it was not a small book. It was 16 hours, but it honestly feels like a duology that has the trilogy's worth of content just mushed into 2 books. It was a really good time. Again, I've already spoken at length about it, so I'll keep it really quick. Forbidden romance, evil king, tragic curses, fated friendships. It's all there. It had a really good balance of story but also romance, and enough romance to keep you coming back. There's so many complicated things in that I won't tell you because it's a part of the story. So just know I liked it. Then I read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Moving on. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara was next. Again, I have a whole ass video about me reading this. I cry a lot. There is some really lovely, candid moments of me experiencing the end of this book. I've looked at the analytics and y'all who have watched that video were really only there for the crying parts. There's a spike when I start crying and then it dips off directly after I finish crying. I see you here experiencing my pain with me, but overall has become one of my favorite books that I will never actively recommend to anyone ever. And I'm equal parts terrified and so excited to read this again in the near future that I will gladly suffer through the 700 pages again to experience. Again, check content warnings, take care of your brain. It's a rough one. It's real rough in terms of everything. Check the warnings, have a good time if you are gonna read this. I understand that that is a moot recommendation because who has a good time reading this, really? Next, I listened to The Binding by Bridget Collins, another audiobook. Are we surprised? This is a creepy and quite surprising fantasy. It's following a boy who is sent from his home to a binder to become like an apprentice, and she's kind of like this old reclusive lady that no one likes to go near. However, his memory's got some gaps in it. He's a bit confused and he's wondering who this strange mysterious boy is who's staring at him through the kitchen window of the cottage. I loved this story, the vibes, all of the twists and turns, immaculate. And I cannot stress to you my disappointment when I found out that The Betrayals by Bridget Collins is not the sequel. This is a standalone, completely different story. So she actually did not finish The Betrayals because I was just so hurt by it not being the sequel to The Binding. In saying that, The Binding does actually do really well to stand on its own 2 feet. It has a really lovely, complete story just in and of itself. And I love a good book magic story. It just hits different, you know? The writing was impeccable, the narrator was average, story and characters, A+. We had a fun time. The next 5 books are the last 5 that I read in December of 2022, and there is, again, a whole ass video about that. Go check it out, I'll leave a link, you know the drill. But with that caveat, I will not be going into too much detail for these because we've already extensively talked about it. Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, the one and only BookTok famous Achilles retelling. And coming from a galley who knows nothing really about Greek mythology because all of the names and events and everything are just far too much for my tiny pea brain to hold in and of itself all in one go. Too much. Do I think it was the masterpiece that everyone acclaims and hypes it up to be? I don't think it is, and I think that that's to its detriment. I would have enjoyed this a lot more if I didn't have such high expectations for it. But I did have a decently good time reading the story. Again, for someone who doesn't know a lot about Greek mythology, it wasn't too confusing. There was lots and lots and lots of names that I just blanked I could not tell you the characters' names for the life of me, obviously aside from the main one. I think Madeline Miller did a really good job at bringing it back when those characters were relevant and really just honing in on who was actually talking, because there's a lot of names and there's a lot of characters and this book spans a long time. But overall, decently good time. I felt some feelings. I do not regret my time spent within these pages. Then, Are You Listening by Tillie Walden. This was my first Tillie Walden that I've read and I had such a good time. This is a graphic novel following two relatively just lost in life women. They go on a journey of self-discovery on a road trip that has a really lovely magical realism twist. I've said it before, I will say it again, I just need to bring it back to how this story is drawn. I cannot get over the color palette. The way that some of the panels are drawn, where you've got the same scene across different panels, which is something that I haven't seen before. You've got lines that separate the panels, literally waving and fading in and out as is relevant to the story. I simply cannot. I am so excited to jump into other Tillie Walden. However, being in Australia, or at least my part of Australia, there just isn't any, so I have to order them online, and just having to buy it online makes me more cautious about my purchases, and that's where I have to get the Tillie Waldens, and they're not cheap because they're graphic novels, and graphic novels online are not cheap. But we'll persevere, we'll push through, and I really do want to read more of Tillie Walden because I really, really love her art style. Like, I think that this is probably one of my favorite art style graphic novels that I've read. Then we read The Silent Patient. I do have this physically, I just don't know where it is. I don't know if you can see the aftermath behind me of like all of the books on my TBR that you would have already seen, and then also all the books that I read last year which are out for a reason that actually doesn't exist. Now they're here. Regardless, I read The Silent Patient. This is by Alex Michael Dees. This is a mystery thriller. We're following a woman who has murdered her husband and she stops speaking. You also follow a therapist who is trying to make her speak to understand what happened that night. I've spent some time thinking about this book. Immediately after reading it, I was equal parts okay with how the story turned out in the end because it was really, really cleverly done. I think that the execution of the book was fantastic. I just couldn't stand the characters. We wanted unwell, unhinged, mentally ill women who kill their husbands, and instead we got egotistical, god complex, cis white psychology man. Not ideal. As I said, I've spent some time thinking about this, mostly because my poor co-workers and family have had to listen to me rave about this book after I read it because I just can't process my thoughts about it in my head. It was definitely a unique twist on like a psychological thriller mystery. I was not scared at any point throughout this. I don't know if I was supposed to be. I don't know if that was the point of the book, but that's what I was expecting going in, and that's not what I got. But overall, the concept was good. The characters were subpar and intolerable at best. Maybe that was the intent, it just wasn't my jam. Then we did a bit of a 180 and we read Time as a Mother by Ocean Vuong, which is Ocean Vuong's poetry collection, and I'm hesitant to say that I read this. Yes, the words went into my brain and then immediately exited out the nearest emergency row. If you have any easier poetry collections that I could start with, or any recommendations, that would be great. I am picking up the Surrender Theory pretty soon once it gets here, but I really do feel like I am still at the Rupi Kaur level of poetry. Brain is not big for poetry at the moment. Please help my brain to grow so that I can be the poetry gal of my dreams. And the last book that I read in 2022 was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This was a reread. I think I read this in August of 2021, potentially. This follows a cafe in Tokyo that allows you to go back in time to visit someone who has been at the cafe. However, you must return back to your seat or back to where you are from before your coffee gets cold, among other various rules and regulations. It was magical, it was emotional, it was fantastic. It was just as good the second time around, and it was such a strong book to finish 2022 on. I had a really, really lovely time revisiting these pages. And then we kicked off 2023 in January on a good note as well, having read the sequel, Tales from the Cafe. I read this in one sitting. It was great. We have 4 new stories with 4 new characters who enter the cafe to go back in time. However, in this one we do learn more about the magic system of the cafe as well, which I really, really enjoyed. It was just as good as the first one. It was moving and it was also emotional, and I want to tell you so much about it, but I can't because it's spoilers. But just know that I loved reading this, and this is truly probably one of my favorite series that I have read. I am so excited to read the third one. I have it already, and I am so deeply sad that I didn't buy the signed first edition copy of it when I was in Scotland. Next, she did another audiobook. We listened to Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. Again, there's a vlog, you'll have seen it. I finally finished listening to this in January. I didn't quite finish it for the end of 2022, but that's fine. Much like The Binding, this was a book that was based in book magic. This is a new favorite subgenre of fantasy for me, library book magics. Again, another fantasy. We follow a main girl. She is raised in a library, and the library is essentially this storage holding place for grimoires that are like differing levels of power, and then if they're damaged they can turn into monsters, so they need to really avoid like damaging or doing anything wrong to the books. There's a morally grey male lead, the quiet dangerous side character, we have the angsty romance. It's all there. I listened to this a lot when I was playing the new Pokemon. That was a really lovely experience. And there's a novella for this coming out soon, or is already out, and I need to read it. I need to know what happens after the events of the book, because this is a standalone. Like, this is a standalone fantasy book. It wasn't exactly a cliffhanger, but I just want more. And then I listened to The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang, another audiobook. To be honest, if I didn't listen to audiobooks, I probably wouldn't read. I drive 2 hours for work every day and I get bored in that time. So I like to fill that time with cheesy romances. This is an adult contemporary romance. We follow Stella Lane. She is an autistic female who is just living her best life, working in her dream job in statistics and data, truly excelling at her professional life. We love to see it. However, a co-worker insinuates that she is not good in bed, and so Stella hires an escort to teach her how to be better at that. It's an enemies to lovers, it's a he falls first, it's a who did this to you. It is just all of the tropes that you want in a book. We love the representation, we love the vibes, immaculate. Was it uncomfortable though to listen to Spice on my way to work? Just a tad. But we persevered for the story. Next, Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. Every time I read this title, Kelly Clarkson is just in my head for hours. This is a YA contemporary fiction that has just really confirmed that I think I've grown out of this genre. It actually wasn't that bad as far as YA contemporary romances go. It's just, I think that I don't enjoy following characters like this anymore. And I also just really enjoyed listening to this predictably while playing video games, except this time it was Disney Dreamlight Valley. We follow Emily. She kicks off her summer with her best friend missing, and all she has is a letter that her best friend left her, basically outlining a scavenger hunt type list of things that she has to do over the summer to get her out of her box, because Emily is actually quite codependent on her best friend. Now don't get me wrong, I understand that this type of character is super relatable for young people, and I think that that's why I didn't particularly connect, because I've kind of passed that point in my life. And if I had read this when I was in high school, I absolutely would have loved it, because I would have just been like, hey, it's me, I'm Emily. But I just cannot get past characters who have social anxiety as their primary personality trait. It's just not something that I can cop. Also, there was a stupid amount of child neglect in this book. Parents just not knowing what their children are doing. Parents completely shafting all of their parental responsibilities to write a play. Uncomfy. Overall, the story was just a bit too long. It could have been condensed down. It did not have to be this many pages. It was fine. I had a decent time. I do have one more Morgan Matson on my shelf. That will be the determinant as to whether or not I continue to pick up books from her. Because like I said, they're not terrible. They're not bad books. I just don't relate to the characters, and I don't enjoy being in these characters' perspectives anymore. The last two books, these two books, you'll see next week, so I'm not going to talk about those, but just know that they're there. Watch this space. What am I currently reading? I am currently maybe a quarter of the way through Skyward by Brendan Sanderson. I've also just started the Vampire Academy book 5, reading that along with a few other people in the Booked and Busy Discord. We're rereading the Vampire Academy series. It's been a slow start, but we're getting there. And I'm also reading currently The Arc for a Deadly Vow by JD Ronan, which is one of the hosts in the Booked and Busy podcast. So there's a lot going on in the Booked and Busy community right now, but that's kind of it. I'm very aware of the fact that we've had a few sit down videos in a row. There is a vlog coming next week, fret not. I'm excited about it. We have some exciting things happening in that one. You'll see, watch this space, that'll be out next week. But thank you guys so much for tuning in this week to this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're having a fantastic day or night or whatever time it is where you are in the world, and I will see you next week with a vlog. Goodbye.